Good evening, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of People of Interest. First and foremost, I'd like to extend a very heartfelt thank you to our partners, the Jewish Chronicle, and also to my esteemed colleagues, Chabad Shluchim and Shluchas from around the country, to Chabad of Manchester, Chabad of Bristol, Chabad of Finchley, Chabad of Golders Green, Chabad of Mill Hill East, Chabad of Bournemouth, Chabad of Nottingham, Chabad of Liverpool Universities, and Chabad of Hampstead Garden Suburb. Please God, next week we will be hosting the esteemed Professor Dershowitz. He is going to be talking about his life on the stand. The date will be the 26th of January, the time 8 o'clock. And I hope you can make it for what promises to be a very thought-provoking and insightful talk. Tonight we are really privileged to be hosting one of the premier public intellectuals of today, of this world, of this time, Rabbi Manis Friedman. He's a world-renowned author, a filmmaker, a lecturer. His speaking tours have taken him around the world. His first book, Doesn't Anyone Blush Anymore, is currently in its 5th printing. He has produced an award-winning film, The Lost Key, and has been interviewed on more than 50 television and radio shows throughout the past few decades. Rabbi Friedman has also earned the distinction of being YouTube's most popular rabbi. He has an absolutely unique ability to articulate Jewish wisdom in fresh, thought-provoking manners that are really the envy of Jewish communicators from around the world, and really so many of them, and I include myself in that category, admire and seek to emulate Rabbi Friedman's unique ability to balance authenticity with accessibility. And of course, tonight's topic could not be more timely. The talk tonight is titled, Where Do We Go From Here? Inspiration and insights for how to navigate the difficult times and the new normal we are facing. Just when we thought things were stabilizing here in this country, but also around the world, we experienced this so-called second wave, and now, of course, the current lockdown, which makes this evening that much more important and relevant. Without further ado, I'd like to turn over the mic to Rabbi Friedman.
Thank you so much. That was very nice of you. Now the pressure is on. Where do we go from here? By the way, how do you like my background?
It's stunning. It looks very biblical, very like a house of worship.
Yeah, it's a hotel room.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, where do we go from here? The real question is, where have we ever gone? It's not just now that the question exists, it's forever. Where are we going? Where is this world headed? And where is it supposed to be going? Which is an even better question. So the first thing is, if we want to chart progress, where do we look? How do we know whether we're progressing or regressing? In terms of politics, it's really none of our business. We're not politicians. In terms of health, we're not doctors. And the doctors are not doing so well themselves, but that's another story. So for the main body of citizens of this planet, what are we supposed to be charting? What are we supposed to be measuring? We're supposed to be looking at moral improvement. That's all. Because that's where we have freedom of choice. So is the world getting better? Well, what do you mean better? Healthier or morally better? Particularly when the health is not so good and the politics is not so good, then we really need to improve in the moral arena. Are we improving? Vastly. You're not going to see it in the news. It's not going to be in the headlines, but we are improving vastly. Just one little example. All the experts in Israel, probably everywhere else as well, all the experts predicted that with the lockdown, with the quarantine, husbands and wives being stuck in the house with each other, the divorce rate is going to go through the roof. And domestic violence is going to become out of control. The latest statistic in Israel shows that in the last 11 months, the divorce rate has gone down by 3%. Now, 3% is not very impressive. But if you consider the 60% increase that they were predicting, and now it's gone down 3%, so it's actually gone down 63% based on predictions. So where did the experts go wrong? How were their predictions so off? It's not because they're not good with numbers. It's because they underestimate human beings. In general, we have a very cynical view of the human being. And that was not the Rebbe's view. The human being is an incredible moral being. Of course, things can derail us. We can get into very bad conditions. But at the core, human beings are good people. When forced to be good, we are very capable of doing it. When distracted and confused, we can become very neglectful and maybe even cruel to each other. But if you look at the world today, compared to 11 months ago, people are better, much better. I'm not talking about health. I'm talking about the morality, the decency, the Menschlichkeit, and to some degree the spirituality. We can talk to people about God today who would never have listened a month ago, 10 months ago. Now God has become a comfortable subject, like intuitively correct. Even the resurrection of the dead has become comfortable, palatable. So yes, there's an incredible improvement. So where are we going from here? We are going towards a much more moral world, a world that is really intolerant of evil, of war, of conflict. So we can be confident and certainly optimistic that in a very short time, the world is going to mature into a much better world than we've ever known. And we're going to discover things about ourselves that we never dreamed of. And if you want, I can share one of those dramatic changes. But where do you want to go with this conversation?
Okay, let's do this conversation style. I feel like, listen, Rabbi Friedman, you're preaching to the choir, quite literally, because as you know, I've spent quite a few years researching at least the Rebbe's perspective based on the Hasidic perspective, which is an elucidation of the Jewish perspective on the human condition, on the trajectory of history, etc. But I do think many of our viewers will be taken aback by what you said. And therefore, on their behalf, I'm going to push back slightly, if that's okay, on a number of fronts. Let's talk for a moment about relationships, because you make a fascinating point as far as statistics are concerned in Israel, and that's something that's really worth analyzing and drilling down deeper. But at the same time, we know there have been statistics coming out of other countries where the opposite has been the case. So maybe the first question is, how do you explain the context of that data? Because data requires context. Is it something to do with Israel? Maybe it has to do with the Israeli spirit. Maybe Israelis are, and by extension Jews are really good at dealing with the most difficult of times, and this has proven to be one of those examples. Is that maybe what it's about? Maybe you can share a little more about that.
There are obviously the stress, the additional stress to everything else in life that this virus has brought will produce some negative results. Obviously, that is not surprising. It is not indicative of anything other than the fact that people don't like to suffer. The really amazing thing is that that's in the news, but the good stuff you won't see in the news. So we really can't get our opinion of the world from the news. In fact, I'm convinced that when good news shows up in the news, Mashiach has arrived.
So that on that note, let me jump in because there's actually been an amazing trend, Rabbi Friedman, which according to you will demonstrate just another phase in the furtherance of the manifestation of Mashiach's coming. And that is that many of the major news publications today have sections that are exclusively devoted and focused on sharing good news. Absolutely. The Wall Street Journal, here in this country, I think it's the Times. I have a list somewhere, but I'm talking about not minor, if you will, feel good, newspapers, but hardcore, high level, usually very cynical papers. And I think that's actually fascinating. And it talks to your point that we are moving forward in this respect. We are recognizing the importance of positivity in terms of well-being, etc. There's a well-known actor who has created a whole show during COVID, exclusively focused to telling positive stories, feel-good stories. And that's very important. I share in the talks that I give on the topic that the BBC recently published staggering statistics. They say that people who develop positive outlooks tend to live between 11 and 15% longer than their more cynical and pessimistically inclined individuals. So there's a greater shift and focus on positivity. That's no doubt the case.
So let me share something a little futuristic. This is all kind of predictable. But what's really futuristic and unprecedented, consider this picture here. For 5,000 years or so, we have been laboring under the impression that we, human beings, are very fragile, very vulnerable, very dependent on God or on each other, and very needy. So here's the picture. You have many needs. Most of them you cannot fulfill by yourself. So you have to turn to others. You have to turn to God. You have to plead with God. You have to beg God. You have to promise him to be good. You have to hope that he's in a good mood. And then maybe he'll give you what you need. Otherwise, you're in trouble. Good luck. That fueled so many movements and so many sciences and religion, all fueled by the fact that we are so fragile and so needy, desperate for help. On the other hand, religion has created a picture of God as being perfect, invulnerable, untouchable, unreachable, unflappable. He needs nothing. He just sits there watching us struggle. And of course, when we misbehave, he smites us. But that's the picture of God. So we are extremely needy. He doesn't need anything. That's universal. from the beginning of time. In the near future, this is going to change dramatically because we are going to discover something really interesting. Human beings have no needs. You see, we're so overburdened with the amount of needs. Back in the olden days, our needs were simple. They were about 5. Keep me warm, keep me fed, give me something to drink, and don't shoot me. Life was pretty simple. Hard to achieve, but not very complicated. But with time, we've added all sorts of needs. You need to get a job, and you need to pay your bills, and you need to have a mortgage, and you need to buy a car, and it just goes on and on. And then the advertisements that tell you what you need that you never even thought of. You got to have one of these, and you got to have some of that. It's just becoming too much. So we go for therapy. Now, what happens when you go for therapy? You discover you have needs you don't even understand. Your mother never wanted to have you, so now you got to fix that. And your brother hates you, and it just goes on and on and on. So 1 second, I came here to be relieved of my needs, and you're just giving me more needs. So in desperation, I go to religion. I think religion will give me some relief, will give me some peace of mind. But what do you discover? Well, if you think you have needs in this world, wait till you get to heaven. Your troubles are just going to begin. So, okay, I can't take this anymore. This is not working. The future of human psychology, I'm sure, is that instead of looking a little deeper and finding more needs, look much deeper, and you will discover what Hasidus has been trying to tell us. You have no needs. You have none. You're a creation. Only a creator has needs. If you create a universe, you obviously have something. You're after something, but if you're the creation, what do you need? So children today are already expressing this. You ask them to clean up the room, and the 11-year-old says, I didn't ask to be born. What does that have to do with cleaning up a room? Well, if I didn't ask to be born because I don't need to be born, then why do I need to clean up my room? In other words, don't tell me I need. That doesn't compute anymore. I don't need. Well, you have to get a job. No, I don't have to get a job. And what is the response to that? A threat. Well, you don't get a job, you're not going to have any money, you're not going to have a place to live, you're going to be out on the streets, you're going to get a disease, you're going to die. Doesn't work anymore. I didn't ask to be born. Don't threaten me with death. This is something so amazing. There is something much more divine in the human being than human. When you say, well, you got to survive, nobody wants to die, we're all afraid of dying, be gesund, you got to be healthy, that's the main thing. No, it's not. It's not. So the phrase, you need or you must or you should, gone. It's gone. I don't need anything. For example, do I need to eat? Oh, I need to eat. No, I don't need to eat. Personally, I need to stop eating, but I can't. So why do I call it my need? Did I choose it? Did I design myself this way? Did I even agree to this? No. So why is it my need? Here's the story that got me thinking along these lines. A young boy leaves New York and goes to France to yeshiva years ago, when the yeshiva in France was still quite primitive. He didn't last 3 months. Outdoor toilet, nah, it's not for him. Couldn't last 3 months. But he came back a changed boy. Because the day he arrived, he went into the office and said to the mashpia, he said to the dean, I need to call my mother. Which phone can I use? And to his total surprise, the dean said to him, you need to call your mother? He said, yes, I got to call her, tell her I arrived. You need to call your mother? He got over his surprise and he understood what the dean was saying. He wasn't a foolish boy. So he corrected himself and he said, my mother needs me to call her. Which phone can I use? And the dean said, now you're talking like a mensch. Why would you plagiarize your mother's need and call it yours? A teenage boy does not need to call his mother. It's not in the nature of a teenage boy, unless he needs money. It wasn't true. It was not a true statement. I need to call my mother. No, you don't. The reason you should call is because your mother needs to hear from you. The same is true with all religion. I need to be good. I need to be holy. I need to be religious. No, I don't. I don't. So my grandfather says, you have to keep kosher. You got to go to shul. And I say, I thought about it and I've come to the conclusion that I really don't need to. Well, do you want to suffer in Gehenna and burn in hell? You're threatening me, which means you have nothing more to say. So I'm right. I don't need to. This is such a dramatic change in psychology, but also in theology. I don't need anything. I'm a guest. It's the creator who is needy. You don't create a universe for no purpose. So the creator is after something. The creator is trying to achieve something, and we're here to help, but we don't need anything. So look at where it leaves me. I am free of burdens. I don't need anything. I don't need to be good. I don't need to achieve. I don't need to accomplish. I don't need anything. It's all bogus. And don't threaten me. It doesn't work anymore. In the olden days, the farmer wakes up his son and says, come, we have to go work. And the kid says, why? He says, because it's late in the season. If we don't get the seeds in, there'll be no harvest and we will starve to death. So the kid jumps out of bed and goes to work. What do you say to your child today when you wake him up in the morning? Come on, it's late. You got to catch the bus. The bus to where? To school. Why do I have to go to school? Well, because you got to get into a good college. You got to get a good job. You got to make a good living so you can pay the mortgage. Well, why do I have to do any of that? Well, if you don't have a house and you don't pay the mortgage, you're going to be out on the streets. And you're going to catch a disease and die. And the kid said, well, that's why I have to get up now and catch a bus. It's far-fetched. And besides, I won't die. I'll be on welfare. It's not working anymore. So, on the one hand, psychologically, I am completely liberated. I can breathe. I got no problems. I've got nothing to prove. I've got nothing to accomplish. Really, I am a totally free agent. On the other hand, God needs me. So I am not needy, but I am needed. Doesn't that start to make a little sense? Life is starting to make sense. I don't even know how we functioned until today. You're born into the world, and now you have to. What? Did I agree to this? Did I sign a contract? The Rebbe has been telling us this for many years, but it took a while to sink in. Ani loy nivreisi. If you ask me, for me, I don't need to be born. Thank you very much. Don't do me no favors. And if I'm not born, I'll never complain. Ella. So why am I here? Because I am necessary. I am needed. I am not needy. You might even say the person who says, I need to be religious or I need to succeed is playing God. A human being doesn't need, God needs. So if you start thinking that you need, you have a God complex. You're not God, you don't need. But He needs you. So you're absolutely indispensable and you have no problems. I like that. It's a very good combination. So every minute of my existence is infinitely valuable on a divine cosmic level. And I have no problems. Ooh, that's a relief.
So in simple terms, if I'm going to translate what I understand you to be saying, you're suggesting that there's been a fundamental shift, especially among the youth. We're need-based living, in other words, hyper-individualistic, focus on self is just not cutting it anymore. And the only thing that's working today, because all facades have been shattered, is that which was always the main motivator of the human being, because that's the story of mankind, which is purpose. I'm just going to use the word purpose for simplistic purpose.
Good.
Purpose. I find that to be fascinating. I just have two quick thoughts on that, and then tell me, Rabbi, I don't want to stop your flow. So if it's better if I jump in, because
it's your show.
No, really not. It's very weird to hear from you. A lot of times I speak to people in the so-called older generation, and they'll complain that millennials are the worst. There's no loyalty, there's no integrity, it's all about me, etc., etc. It's very interesting because at one point we were looking for some staff, and I interviewed probably 20 or 25 people, and every single one of them said the same thing, which got me thinking. When I asked them why they left their previous company, which is the obvious question, they said, I no longer felt challenged. I no longer felt like I was making a meaningful contribution. And I thought to myself, I don't know who's advising you, but that's pretty bad guidance, because the last thing your potential new employer wants to hear from you is that it's now his job to provide you with enough challenges to keep you stimulated, motivated, and self-actualized. I have a job I need to get done. Are you in or are you out? And I started thinking about this. And then I realized something I think very much in line with what you're saying. Young people today would forfeit job security and a high paid salary for meaningful impact. to feel needed, to feel like they're making a difference. It's not a negative, it's something incredibly positive if you get to it. What they're really saying is, I want to reach my full potential because that's why I'm here. And I would exchange that with what my parents and grandparents would never have exchanged it for, which is job security, etc. I think that's, if I can say so, I think it's an expression of what you're saying.
People desperately want to know that they are needed, and they'll give up their own needs to know that they're needed. This is exactly the way God wants us to be. Now, when Avraham is, God calls Avraham, and Avraham says, Hineni. Hineni now takes on a whole new meaning. Hineni means I'm available. I'm unemployed. I got no needs. So if you need me to do something, please give me something to do. Hineni, I am free. I am otherwise unemployed. So even I need to eat. Really, when you think about it, that's like that boy plagiarizing his mother's need. You didn't design yourself to eat, and there are times when you desperately want to go without food or without drink. Sometimes you want to go without breathing because you want to do some deep sea diving. And you got to keep coming up because you need to breathe. I didn't ask for this. It's a handicap. Nobody asks for a handicap. So why do I need to eat? Because I was designed by the Creator to be dependent on food. I don't like the idea. So don't call it my need. Anytime a human being eats, he is doing what God designed him to do. It's a whole new insight into L'Shem Shamayim.
Yeah, it's a fascinating. In the High Holiday service, we talk about Avinu Malkeinu, God Almighty, right? Our Father, our King. Aseh Imanu, do for us, and then we say Lemancha, for your sake. Really? How pretentious! But the truth is, based on your explanation, it's exactly that's precise. It's not my need; it's yours.
So when a person says, I need to eat, it's plagiarism. You see, and you're playing God. What, you designed yourself to eat? So you know that famous story about the sage who saw this ugly man at the side of the road, and he said to him, boy, that's pretty ugly. And the man said, don't complain to me, complain to my maker. And he wasn't as ugly anymore. Because for the first time in his life, he admitted to being created. He admitted that he is not God. And the ugliness that he was displaying was that arrogance, thinking that he was God. Once he admitted that he didn't make himself ugly, he wasn't as ugly anymore. So it's simply a matter of not playing God. You need to eat. You need to sleep. You need a job. You need to get to heaven. None of that is true. God designed you to eat, so you have to eat. Nobody asked you. God designed you to sleep, you have to sleep. So sleeping is a godly thing to do. And you turn around and say, no, I need to sleep. Not nice. Be nice. So this changes our entire psychological orientation. I'm going to suffer if I don't get what I need. I don't need. It's the end of suffering. Now, if I take God really seriously, the way I should, because after all, He is the Creator, if I took Him seriously as I should, I may develop a feeling that if He wants something, then I must do it. Like, how can I not? Like, the expression, your wish is my command. Not I need it, but knowing that you need it, it's as if I have no choice but to do it because I take you so seriously. That's beautiful. That will never cause depression, anxiety, dysfunction. On the contrary, you're so healthy. This is where we're headed. This is where we're going. That God will be recognized finally as the one who is the needy one, and we are here to partner with him, to serve him, to further his project, his purpose in creation. And what is that purpose? To become one with us. I was talking recently to some guy. He was really a thoughtful guy, and he was wondering, why did God give us freedom of choice? All the answers he's heard, it doesn't compute. Freedom of choice is a terrible thing. People can kill because freedom of choice. People can steal, freedom of choice. What would be terrible if God just made us good? Well, we wouldn't appreciate the good. Oh, come on, that's pathetic. In order to help me appreciate good, millions of people have to be killed and murdered, and it doesn't work. The fact is that we have freedom of choice in a very limited area of life. Freedom of choice applies only to moral choices, not to anything else. So you don't have freedom of choice to be born or not, to be male or female, to be in this generation or some other generation, to be tall or short, to be strong or weak. We have no choice in these things at all. Where do we have freedom of choice? Only in moral issues, which means only in our response to him. This makes a lot of sense. If God would decide which shoes I'm going to buy, I wouldn't mind. If God decides who I marry, I won't mind. If God decides how many children I'm going to have, I don't mind. In fact, that would be much better. So why the need for freedom of choice? God can make all the decisions for us, and that would be good, except for one thing. He can't make us love him, because that's not love. He can't make us relate to him. That's not a relationship. So if he wants a relationship, he has to give us freedom of choice. The choice to respond to him or not, to love him or hate him, to believe in him or ignore him. It's necessary because otherwise it's not the real thing. If he makes me love him, I don't love him. So our relationship with God is becoming much more real. Now, looking back at how religion treated God, it is so mechanical, it's so inhumane. And so God gets a very bad reputation. Why would you want to love a God like that? Who is invulnerable, who doesn't need anything, and yet puts you through hell. So
Right.
we are definitely headed in a very good direction.
That's very interesting. That was actually one of the most interesting areas I discovered in the Rebbe's thinking, and this came to light especially in the 60s and 70s, when for the first time the sort of conformist, uniform community traditional mold or setting of religion, which was the institutional Judaism of the synagogue membership and all of that. That was the first time, I think, in relatively recent history where the system was threatened and essentially dismantled. And most of Jewish leadership was decrying this as the beginning of the end. And and the Rebbe saw it differently. The Rebbe actually said that this is just the beginning of something wildly different, much more authentic and organic. But if you think about it, really, if you lived in biblical times, and if you violated Shabbos, you were, your life was taken, or if you murdered, or if you did whatever it might be. But furthermore, there were certain spiritual divine punishments, such that if a person did certain sins, they were affected almost, relatively immediately and in a very visible and direct way. What type of free will can you talk of in that generation, in that era, in that context? It's not free will. It's the choice between staying alive or not. So, okay, so I did Shabbos. But today, when someone keeps Shabbos, it's a very different Shabbos, and I think that's what you're suggesting. It's coming from within. But if I can, Rabbi Friedman, I think I would link both points, because the point of not acting out of need, but rather because I'm needed, further emphasizes my choice. If I need it, it's not my choice. You created me with this need. I have to follow the need. But if you have a need and therefore I am needed, now I feel like I'm in the driver's seat. I can give. I can be a part of this. I can make a contribution out of my free will. But here's a question, just to bring this down a little bit. Would you say that the world around us is becoming more open to God? And if so, where do you see that? Because when you do look at the facade, some would argue the opposite. Especially once you see how the different political parties are organized in the states, it seems to be one of the underlying points of tension is religion, or at least religious issues, organized religion. But maybe you'd argue that's what it's about. It's about organized religion or not. And we're seeing the slow dissolution of what we call organized religion. Anyway, what do you think about that?
I think there has been a lot of talk about God, Ten Commandments, very little about religion. Nobody is quoting Bible. The Bible thumpers nobody listens to them. So don't preach religion, but talk about God. That is very healthy. In fact, religion should start talking more about God and less about reward and punishment and all that stuff. But I think that back then, when people were immediately punished and saw the consequences of their behavior, what kind of freedom of choice did they have? They were stiff-necked. See, now it makes sense. We had to be stiff-necked to have freedom of choice back then.
As the counterbalance.
I don't care. You don't scare me. And then now, let's talk about another thing, also futuristic. Another assumption that has been historically, universally accepted and assumed: life is temporary, death is permanent. There's nothing so permanent like death. And there's nothing so fleeting and temporary like life. I'm already depressed. How in the world life is fleeting, temporary, unreal, but death is reliable. Death is permanent. Death is for certain. That is so depressing. It's a morbid way of looking at life. And it's not true. It can't be true. Life is forever. Death is temporary. People are listening. People are hearing it. There's no pushback. Like, what are you talking about? I'll tell you what I'm talking about. What exactly is death? We think we know, and it scares us, and it motivates us, and we have no idea. What exactly is death? The soul is alive, which means it can't die. It's like saying life can die. No, life can't die. Water can't be dry. Salt can't go bad. Life can't die. It's an oxymoron. So the soul, being a living thing, can't die. So death must be the body. But really, the body was never alive. It borrowed life from the soul when the soul was in the body. But without the soul, the body has no life. So can you really say the body died? In other words, does life ever end? Any life at all? Does it ever end? The answer is no. How can it? Even scientifically, does any energy ever disappear? No, it just changes form. Life can't die. So the question, is there life after death? What a confused question. What are you saying? Is there life after death? The question is, what is death? So what really dies? Torah told us a long time ago. What dies is your contract. The soul has a contract for how long it's going to be in the body, down to the last minute. When that contract runs out, then the body goes back to where it came from, and the soul goes back to where it came from. So what died? Your allotted time. You ran out of time. You didn't run out of life. So the soul continues to live because it can't die. But not only that, it can't be anything other than a soul. It doesn't become electricity. It doesn't become a virus. Actually, maybe it does. If you're really, really evil and you lose your soul, what does that mean? Your soul is no longer the same personality. It has now become some other kind of energy. But when we say the soul continues to live, it means its character doesn't change, its relationships doesn't change, its memories don't change. It's still the same person. So if your grandfather was a very stubborn man while he was alive, he's still stubborn. And if he was friendly and funny, he still is. And if he shows up in your dreams, you'll see it. He's still good old grandpa. Meaning that he still cares about you. His relationships are still important to you. Everything in life is experienced in the soul, and the soul doesn't die. Now, the soul, without the body, is not happy. You know, the expression rest in peace? No soul rests in peace because it wants to go back to its body. Without the body, you are not needed. The soul in heaven has all its needs met, but it's not needed. It can't serve God. Only with a body can you serve God and participate in God's vast eternal plan. So the souls in heaven are all waiting to come back to their bodies. The same body they had when they performed their mitzvahs. So the body that decomposed is going to recompose. If it can come apart, it can also come back together. I heard this joke. Now, old musicians don't die, they just decompose.
That's cute.
But if you can decompose, you can recompose. If God can make a body out of nothing, he can return the body that already existed and recompose it. The future is life will continue, death will end. Because it's not necessary. Life is necessary, death is not. It serves some purpose, but when that purpose has been achieved, it will no longer be necessary. So we have a completely different picture of what death is. We need to tell children these days, what happened? So many people are dying. What happened to grandpa? What happened to grandma? Where? And we say, oh, he's with God now. Kids hate God. Why is he with God? He should be with me. Oh, God took him. Oh, really? Well, I hate God. It's a bad message. The real message is he is wherever he is, but he's still who he was, and he still cares about you, and he still watches what you're doing, and he still has an opinion about what you're doing. So, yeah, grandpa is far away, but he's still grandpa. He's in heaven? Yes, he's in heaven. Is it a nice place? Nice place. Nobody wants to be there. So don't ever say, oh, he's in a better place. No, not a better place. Really, think about it. You say to a child, Grandpa went to a better place. Well, then why can't I go? I mean, all these messages, they're so inappropriate. You got to tell a kid whose grandfather passed away, you got to tell him, Grandpa is jealous of you. He wants to come back to be with you, and he will. Nobody is happy to stay in heaven. It's a nice retirement home, but we don't believe in retiring.
So you're saying that this idea is changing. People are more receptive to it. How do you, what are the practical, what's the practical ramification, if you will, of this idea for people? How does it change the way they live life? Or, I can imagine it changes the way they, approach the momentary, temporary, respite or, departure, as you would call it. But how does it change the life we're living?
It gives life so much more substance. The notion that life is very brief and then you die. Well, then what is life? It becomes flimsy. It becomes insignificant compared to death. That takes a little of the enthusiasm for life out of our minds, out of our hearts. I mean, how intensely are you going to use your life if you know that it's only temporary and that there's a better world waiting somewhere? That's horrible.
But for many, that's their motivation. That actually, ironically, becomes their motivation for living more focused and more righteous lives. The
Yeah,
very
well,
knowledge that where we are now is temporary. It's a fascinating thing because the Mishnah and Avot tells us one thing and then the other, meaning they're different. There's a debate. One says this world is merely a precursor, an antechamber to the next. And Rabbi Yaakov, who I personally quote him much more often, says that this world, the entire world to come can't compare to 1 hour of good deeds, which is the message you're sharing.
Yeah, so to clear that up, the statement that this world is only the hallway towards the world to come, that's not talking about heaven. That's talking about this world as it's going to be when we fix it. So yes, this world is a preparation for the improvement of this world. In other words, it's going to get a lot better. That's the message. When it says 1 hour of life in this world is better than all, that's talking about heaven.
Let me, if you will, let me.
But what is,
Sorry, go ahead.
right.
I don't want to. I don't want to shift. I don't want to shift conversation unless we finish the previous point. But I did. There's a lot of people that I've been talking to of the past period of time, and they have been struggling. This is to go back to the beginning with relationships, with parenting, with especially spousal and parenting, I guess. And you opened with something very thought provoking. But I wonder if you're happy for us to sort of drill down into the topic of relationships, because I know that while you have so much to share on all topics, relationships is a particularly complex topic, and it's a topic that I find you have such illuminating ideas to share. If
It
it's
applies.
Sorry?
It applies very, very,
Mhm.
very significantly to relationships. If I'm needy, you're in trouble. In any marriage, if I am needy, well, then you're in trouble. You either satisfy my needs or get out of here. Once in a while, I'll do you a favor just to keep you going in doing what I need. It's a nasty relationship. And we're convinced that that's as good as it gets. It's got to get a lot better than that. Actually, the only time you get married is when you have no needs. As long as you feel needy, do not get married. Don't inflict this on another person. It's not nice. I'm going to marry you and I'm going to dump all my neediness on you. And if you don't respond properly, you're the failure. Oh, no, 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 no. See, God created the world in order to achieve a relationship. But he was God before that, which means he was not needy. He didn't come into this world dumping his needs on you. His only need is to have you. That's not needy. That's noble. You see, the kid who said, I need to call my mother. In addition to being wrong, it's uninspiring. You need to call your mother, so go find a phone. If you say, my mother needs me to call her, everyone will rush to help you because you're doing something noble. So if it's your need, I'll handle it. This is not earth-shattering or life-changing, but if you're doing something noble, everyone rallies around you. They want to help you and they're jealous of you. Everybody wants to do something noble. So if you're getting married, you have to do it the way God did. First, become perfect so that you have no needs to dump on another person. Then come to the person and say, by myself, as perfect as I am, there's no goodness in it. Perfect is perfect, nothing good about it. Imagine two perfect people living side by side. Nothing good will ever happen. So when you think you're perfect, then it's time to get married. When you don't want to be perfect anymore, time to get married. When you're about as perfect as you really want to be, now it's time to get married. But you still want to get perfecter, don't get married. You're too selfish. So, how do we get to where we're not going to inflict our needs on our spouse? The best solution is realize that you have no needs. What's with all these needs? You don't have needs. Let it go. On the other hand, if your spouse needs you, well, now it's a party.
But
It's a simple example of you have to make lunch. You need to eat lunch. So you go into the kitchen. You go, well, what are you going to do? You open a can, a jar, leftovers, whatever. But somebody calls and says, can I come over for lunch? You cook up a storm. Now it's a party.
but if I could push back for just a moment here, ostensibly, what brings one person into contact with another in a deeper way, not in an acquaintance way or in a transactional way, is an attraction, is the sense that this is a person who, for example, I'd like to spend the rest of my life with. That doesn't just happen. It's a result and a derivative of attributes or qualities or virtues, advantages, or things that do talk to the lower model you were describing. The model of someone thinking, this is what I feel when I'm around this person. This is what I can get. This is how I can grow, etc., etc. Whatever word a person puts after this is the fill in the blank, why I'm attracted to this person. The relationship is founded and begins, at least, originates in need or in want, which is probably a variation of the same flawed thinking. So, how do you get from that place to a different place, to the place of how am I needed? I, yeah.
That's very good. That's very good. You're getting right to the jugular of what marriage is. Every relationship is the result of an attraction and an interdependence. God created rich people and poor people so that they would need each other. God created teachers and students, they need each other. God created healers and those who need healing so that we're interdependent. None of that is a marriage. What makes marriage unique is that it is not about anything. It's beyond things. It's just us. Of course, the initial attraction is all about things. I like your style, I like your body language, I like your looks, I like your family, I like your sense of humor, I like your maturity, I like your strength. Yeah, all very good. Don't marry any of that. Marry the person. So nothing about your spouse is more important than your spouse. See, in business, that's not true. In business, the reason you're a partner with this person in the business is because he knows the business. If he doesn't know the business, he is not important. In marriage, it's the opposite. Marriage means we, two human beings merging, not about anything.
But again, how does one reach that state? It's not the natural or organic or original state, because that would be someone just walking over to any random stranger saying, "Tell me your needs. I'm here. Hineni." We're not talking about that scenario. We're talking about a scenario where the beginning, the genesis, was in things, to put it simply. So, how does one move or transcend that or transition from that? It's not, doesn't seem like a seamless transition. I know many couples who 50 years down the road have not made that transition. So it's not automatic. It requires a paradigm shift, an existential shift, something that's, how does that happen? When does it happen? How can one make that?
Unfortunately, you're right. It doesn't happen because we don't teach. We don't teach what marriage is. We assume everybody gets married, find somebody, get married. Nobody tells you what it is, what it's supposed to be, how it's supposed to be, and it's a tragedy. The greatest, best marriage in the world was Adam and Chava. You know how long they were married? 970 years. 30. 930 years. And then she outlived him. Chava lived to be 1,000. Oldest person in the world, right? So to be married 930 years, you got to be able. that's a record, right? Now, the amazing thing was they had nobody else to marry. It's not like they made a choice. It was just them. And God said, get married. So they did. What was the attraction? I don't know that there was an attraction. There was nobody else. So what was the point? What was the purpose? The purpose was, as it says, to become one. To become one, not to remain two. So does that mean you're going to help each other in your needs? You're going to complete each other? You're going to perfect each other? No. You're going to become one. That's marriage, not a roommate. So if we would prepare young people before they get married and let them know what it's all about, it would be a lot better. But we do the exact opposite. We raise children to believe in things, in stuff, in materialism. And wanting to be happy is materialistic. The bottom line is, if you're using another person for personal benefits, you are abusing. You don't marry somebody in order to gain something. The somebody is always more important than anything.
Do you have any advice, again, guidance for the young people watching, or people who have been married for many years for that matter, who have experienced an epiphany by virtue of the past 10 minutes, really 50 minutes, hour and 10 minutes. Now they say, okay, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It resonates. I understand that I've never moved beyond a constant evaluation of cost benefit analysis, things, etc. I'm ready to make the leap. How? How do I do that? I feel almost hardwired to want things, and you're telling me I have to give all that up and become completely selfless, in simple terms, really, and altruistic in order for this to really work. I need to put the person before anything they can give me. But I was only attracted to what the person could give me. So how do I make that transition?
So, in most cases, as we get older, we mature, we outgrow those things we thought we needed so desperately, and we start to appreciate each other, and we grow old graciously, gracefully. Um, no guarantee that that's going to happen, but generally, age and maturity brings that around. But we really should start off on the right foot. Like, what does the Chasam say to the Kala? The few words. There's no vows, there's no, cherish and love and obey and till death do us part. None of that, right? What does the Chasam say to the Kala? You and the rest, the Kala doesn't care. He starts off by saying, you. You are betrothed to me. You are sanctified according to Moshe. Doesn't matter. He said you. It's very different than saying, I love you. Oh, you're starting with the I? This is not good news. Any sentence that starts with I can't be good for a relationship. A relationship has to start with the word you. So here's a practical suggestion. Don't say I love you. Say you I love. It's you, not me. In marriage counseling, I often ask people, I hear your complaints. Yes, yeah, terrible. Oh, yeah, it's horrible. Yes, it's. Answer one question. Do you want to make it better? Oh, of course. Well, then go ahead. Make it better. Well, she doesn't he never. No. You can make it better. How? Stop competing. After they finish with their complaints and they're exhausted, I don't interrupt them until they're exhausted. And then at the end, they say, so who's right? There's your problem. You want to be right? Why? What kind of contest is this? The need to be right is one of those needs we got to get rid of. Why do you need to be right? Why? What will you gain by being right? Absolutely nothing, but you'll lose your spouse. So, obviously, if you get married for money, people will look down at you. Nah, that's not nice. Why is that any worse than getting married in order to prove you're right? The things we should eliminate are not all material things. There are non-material things that are just as bad, if not worse. The need to be right, the need to have your needs met. They're terrible. And they're not true. They're not true. You don't need it. So we're not asking you to sacrifice, not even asking you to compromise. Just don't create needs that don't exist. You need to become one with your spouse. Merge, not compete. So here's a question. I think what you were asking was, how do you go from being completely selfishly oriented to suddenly becoming altruistic? Altruistic is our greatest pleasure. We got it all wrong. We get pleasure by being selfish. Altruistic is sacrificing. No, it's not. Getting past our own needs is so liberating. Not a sacrifice. See, if we believe that we were truly needy, and now I have to give all that up for you, oh yeah, that's martyrdom. Yes, just heard this good joke. You know what's wrong with martyrdom? You don't live to enjoy it. It's very sad. You're such a martyr and you're not even going to enjoy it. So it's not compromise and it's not sacrifice, and those words should never be associated with marriage. Now some people say marriage is all about sacrifice. Then don't get married. That's ridiculous. Oh no, it's all about compromise. Yeah, you can compromise for a half hour, not for the rest of your life. So it's not a compromise. It is the healthiest you being you. To merge with your spouse is the most natural, healthiest, most noble, and most pleasurable thing in the world. What is the sacrifice? It's like this guy said, I was good to my wife for 8 years and I've got nothing to show for it. So what exactly are you supposed to have to show for it? If you were good to your wife for 8 years, there's one thing you would have to show for it: a happy wife. And she's not happy. So you were not so good to her for 8 years. Because if you were, she would be a very happy wife, which would make you a very happy husband. So it's not out of our nature. It's the truest nature. See, that's the beauty of this whole idea. In religion, it's always been you have needs, but too bad. God's the boss, and you do what he needs. So you sacrifice, you martyr yourself, you shut yourself down. Nobody cares what you think or what you want. This is God's world, and if you behave yourself, you can stay. If not, get out. That's a very nasty picture, right? But what we're saying now is nothing goes against your nature. Nothing. You should never do anything against your nature. It's not necessary. Giving up your needs? You don't have needs. So, what is your nature? Your nature is that you were created out of God's need and you're his partner in creation. Is that a sacrifice? Is that martyrdom? What is that? That's just you. Learning Tanya would be a very good idea to improve your marriage. Because when you learn Tanya, you learn two things. First of all, that human beings are much more noble than we believe. And secondly, that God is much more human than you think. In a wholly positive way. God is not as otherworldly, and you are not as worldly. That's a good combination. That's why we make such a good shidduch. The Jewish people and God. It's a good shidduch. We're a little more like God than we think, and God is a little more like us than we think.
So one step. So to bring that down, one step more. And then, I really appreciate we've gone a bit over time. Thank you. But I will wrap it up, in deference to your time. The this thing that you, this I so the pushback could be, what do you mean I don't have needs? I have the need. Abraham Maslow, mapped out the hierarchy of needs. You know, maybe I didn't create those needs, so they're not my needs, as you put it so beautifully, but they're still needs nonetheless that need to be met. So, even something as simple as being loved, being cherished, being validated, being acknowledged, being heard, being understood, let alone, the basic physical needs. So, in a practical, just to bring it down one step lower, as it were, to make it somewhat more concrete for people out there, how should tomorrow be different than today in real terms?
In real terms, tomorrow is not going to be about me. First of all, I'm pretty fine the way I am. There's no need to be so hyper focused on me. Secondly, even the needs that I still have, they're not really mine. So I'm living out the life that God gave me, and I'm fine with that. Why do I need to be heard? Why do I need to be validated? Why do I need to be loved? Those things are not the end in themselves. Okay, you're validated. Now what? Like, we need to be forgiven. Okay, fine, you're forgiven. Get lost. Like, what happens after you're forgiven? I don't want to hear from you anymore. So, what good is the forgiveness? We need to be loved, validated, cherished, whatever, complimented, because we want to become one. Those are just steps in the right direction. If you love me and don't hate me, if you validate me and don't reject me, if you bring me in rather than throw me out, then we're going to become one. The objective is oneness. Hashem Echad. It's all about oneness, not about me getting something from you. That's abusive. So, what do you really want? 100 different things? You're crazy. That's impossible. You're making yourself crazy. You can't need 100 things. Just the thought of it is enough to put you into a depression. It's like people say, 613 commandments? Ooh, that's too much. Those are his needs. Don't worry about it. But if you have 613 needs, boy, get yourself to a therapist quickly. Overload. So you don't need a lot of things. You need one thing. And there are many ways of getting there. Love is one of them. But love is the goal? Oh, that's so Christian. And it's not working. Love is not a goal. To be loved, and then what? It's like, I'll marry you for money. Oh, that's nasty. I'll marry you for love. Ah, that's nice. No, it's not. It's exactly the same thing. I just have a different price. This guy charges money. I charge love. You don't love me? It's all over. All I want is the love. And look at how nasty it is, really. My first book came out in 1990. Doesn't anyone blush anymore? It was about relationships and borders and stuff. I wanted a different title. I wanted it to be called Shut Up, I Love You. Because that's really the problem behind every dysfunctional marriage. I married you for love. Remember, we were in love and we got married for love. So I married you for the love. I never asked you for your opinion. I don't want to hear your moods or your opinions and your sensitivities and your fetching. I didn't marry you for that. I just married you for the love. So stick to the love. Everything else is uninvited. So I want your love. I don't want the rest of you. It's exactly the same as if I marry you for money.
Yeah, that's a
If I
very, very.
marry you for money, it means I don't want. Yeah.
In other words, when you say I'm marrying for love, you mean I marry you for how your love makes me feel. It's another level of
Yeah.
self-service.
Yeah. I love love. So if you can give me love, I love it.
Right.
Do I love you?
Right.
No. I never agreed to put up with all of you. I just agreed to put up with your love. That's where it all falls apart. So the first practical thing is don't marry for love. This couple came to me and asked me to do their wedding. They said, we're very much in love, so we would like to get married. I said, oh, too late. Too late. You're already in love? Well, then that's it. Where are you going to go from there? So what would you get married for? You're getting married for love? You already have the love. You don't need to get married. So love is a thing, just like money, just like honor, like yichus. All of these things do not make up a marriage. They may lead to a marriage. You know, it's nice to marry someone you love, but not for the love.
Mm.
So love is not the goal.
Mm.
Love is the method. And in general, love means enjoying that which is important. People think love makes importance. If I love you, you're important. That is so evil. My love makes you important. How arrogant is that? And then when I stop loving you, you're garbage. We've made way too much out of love.
It's very interesting because there's a fellow named Alain de Botton. He's a very well-known philosopher. He's Jewish, by the way, and he speaks a lot about this theme as well. That the concept of romantic love has completely, utterly undermined relationships in this presenting it because it portrays a certain type of perfectionism and ideal that's simply unattainable and it's not true to reality. So let's conclude with one final question. In your experience, because you've been studying this topic for many, many, many years. I mean, you know, that it's a classic for anyone who hasn't purchased it yet. Please do yourself a favor. Why doesn't anyone blush anymore? And I quote it regularly. So you've observed the past, Rabbi, what shall we say, 30, 40 years of up close deep contemplation analysis of relationships. Are we getting better at it or are we getting worse? What's the good news, if there is any?
The good news is that all intimacy has been taken out of relationships. It started in the 60s, actually, when people decided that love should be free. Free love, free of commitment, free of attachment, free of purpose, free of intimacy. Now, all these years later, there's a backlash. Where's the intimacy? It's terrible. Married couples who are happily married, individually, they feel alone in the world. That means they have not bonded. They're living side by side. That's not what we need. We don't need roommates. So there's a very powerful line from a popular song by Billy Joel. The line is, these people are sitting at a bar. They're sharing a drink they call loneliness, but it's better than drinking alone. Loneliness can be alleviated by a roommate, but you're still alone. The only thing that takes away the feeling of aloneness is marriage. Therefore, should a man leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife and become one. Mother and father doesn't do it. The best relationship with your parents, you're still alone in the world. The only relationship in which you become merged and never alone again is marriage. And when you hear marriages that are called successful, and yet they're feeling alone, something's seriously wrong. So the fact that people are now demanding more intimacy, looking for solutions, that's a positive, hopeful sign.
Wow. Well, let's end on that positive note. I want to thank you very much for, I think, a really powerful, zoomed out overview of some real positive, futuristic trends that have already been unleashed and are, in motion, as it were. And I think, actually, as you put it beautifully, everything we spoke about today was deeply interconnected. So let me bless you, Rabbi Friedman, with continued vigor and excellent health and prosperity and serenity to continue to develop, to articulate, and to communicate the wisdom of our tradition to a modern contemporary world that is seeking it out more than ever before. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to come back to you only the truest service, only tremendous reviews and only tremendous feedback of relationships bettered and be they between husband, wife, parent, child, and creation and creator. Thank you so much.
Hatzlacha Rabba.
Thank you.